All right, we're live. Welcome back to another episode of Wellness Unplugged. I'm excited to have registered dietitian Erin Skinner here with me today because we're going to talk about metabolic damage, which is kind of an interesting topic because a lot of people think it doesn't exist. And so we're going to dive more into that, but we're going to hear more about Erin's story as well because, you know, professionals, we very often get into this pursuit because of our own struggles with health and wellness. And so we're going to learn a bit about Erin's backstory as well. So welcome, Erin. Happy to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you kind of have your own or have had your own struggles with weight and disordered eating in the past. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I could say about it is that I really felt like that's who I was. And so I thought I was just one of those people that can't get it together and lose weight. And then when I got more into the place where I was losing weight, but it was from a more disordered place. I think I didn't realize in the time, this is like super common actually in disordered eating. You don't fully realize that it's disordered until later.
Yeah. Is there, or was there like an element of denial or a little bit of like, or a sense of shame kind of connected to it? Or was it just like you totally weren't aware that this was happening?
That's a good question. I mean, this was definitely, a while ago, but there was like some open dieting that I was doing that I didn't feel shame over, and I thought that was normal, but actually it wasn't normal or healthy at all. But then there was actually some secretive, shameful things happening, like because I would have this problem where I would like severely undereat, and then this is actually when I was in college, and we had this sort of like shared fridge situation, and I would like sneak in there and eat food like secretly. I would get where I like would lose it and like binge, and obviously that was like a shameful thing that I realized wasn't quite right, but I don't think I tied it all together at that time because you're just not, you're not in the right place mentally,
Yeah. So then, is your weight something you struggled with in childhood, or is this something that kind of started to show up as you went to college, or?
Yeah. I mean, I think I first became
I say struggled with, but when did you become maybe aware that?
Right. Yeah. I think I became aware in like middle school, and then certainly actually like in high school is like super aware of it. And had like no idea what to do about it or how to eat. I mean, it's not that I was raised super unhealthy, but it was sort of just like, grew up in the 90s, or it's sort of like just fine to have like your whole box of mac and cheese by yourself. It's not like considered bad. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no kidding.
Big bowl of like cereal for the breakfast every day.
Yeah, basically a bowl of dessert followed by like a bowl of dessert for lunch kind of thing. Because when you think about like what goes into craft dinner, it might as well be dessert. It's kind of savory. So
the glycemic load of that is outrageous. You'd be better off with a piece of cake, probably.
Yeah, that's a funny statement. I'm going to quote that. You're better off eating cake than KD. And
true.
it would sound funny to be like cake could probably be healthier than KD, but
I mean, if you think about it, like let's talk about like the glycemic load. It's like the carbohydrate, like the amount, is probably higher. I would literally eat like a whole box of mac and cheese.
Okay.
So there's that.
Yeah. Now, do you reflecting on it, do you have like any idea what led to this pattern of eating?
I think that that's kind of in my mind goes to a deep place in the sense of like our food environment that's been driven a lot by like public policy and like a little bit of like, I think misguided like health guidelines over the past few decades that have led to this place where it's like refined carbohydrate is subsidized. It's supported by dietary guidelines. We have this false idea that we shouldn't eat fat. And so what are you going to eat? You've got to eat something. Well, there's carbs. And so I think just kind of like growing up in that space is like many people have and like still are is kind of getting into what we're going to talk about. That drives a degree of metabolic damage that like, it's not like this is some weird like disease that's uncommon. This is like almost everybody in the modern world has this degree of metabolic damage. And so I think what we have to do is like shift our mindset of like, we have this idea of like you overeat and that makes you overweight. That's not really how it works. It's like you eat the wrong foods, the common foods, it causes metabolic damage. that causes you to overeat, that causes you to be overweight. So it's like if you're just trying to look at a situation and say, okay, you're overweight, so let's start with that and have you lose weight, you're missing the whole thing. You're going to be fighting your body the whole time. It starts with allowing your body to become healthier again, in the sense of like we have these innate self-regulating mechanisms that keep us in a healthy place on their own if they're allowed to just do their thing and not be damaged.
So that's like a really challenging thing in a sense, because people, let's say, for example, people come and they want to work with me, they say like, I want to lose weight. And that's where they're at. And, if they don't start losing weight right away, they're likely to start thinking this program isn't working. And so I think, and you'll find in sort of the nutrition and health coaching world, there is a pressure for people come to you because they want to lose weight to not start there. How do you help people get around this idea that like weight loss has to be the primary and the first goal before we get to anything else?
Right. Yeah. Well, so like, I don't think there's anything wrong with losing weight right away. Because I think that you can be healing your metabolism or not healing your metabolism while you're losing weight. So the way I do it is like, for example, I have this group weight loss program called Lean for Life. In Lean for Life, you lose weight, but you're also getting healthier in terms of your metabolic health at the same time. Whereas, let's say I'm not going to like name things, but like, let's say you pay for this, like these like delivery little snacks that are like these highly processed packaged delivery
like
snacks.
$600 or $800 a month to get
these tiny little like 80 calorie bars, that you're losing weight while your metabolic health is getting worse. And so what that's depending on, it's like, imagine if you like had a dumbbell and you had to hold it out straight in front of you forever. Nobody could do that. You could, maybe I could do it for 5 minutes. Maybe you could do it for 10 minutes, but eventually we're both going to drop it. And that's what happens with most diets, is it's based on your ability to hold out that dumbbell. And it's like, nobody has infinite muscle endurance with restriction. And so it's got to be that it comes more from healing your body's innate ability to just put that dumbbell on a shelf and it holds itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's super cool, because you're right. It's I was a classic yo-yo dieter. I struggled up and down multiple times, and I even got to the point where I would like spite eat because I was so angry that my body wouldn't do what I was trying to force it to do. And it's this crazy. I look back now and I'm like, that was this crazy place to be mentally, but where I was angry at my body for not doing what I was trying to force it to do. And I love that analogy, like trying to hold the dumbbell up and your arm starts to shake and everything's starting to burn until eventually you're just like, I can't take this anymore. And, I'm all of a sudden face deep, let's say, eating a large pizza or something like that. Yeah. But you've highlighted something that's really like cool and sounds very novel. And this is this idea that you can lose weight and heal your metabolism at the same time. Yeah. And why I think that's why I want to dive more into that is because a lot of people, and even in the nutrition and health coaching world, they're going to talk about like, if you go on a diet, you're going to damage your metabolism. But you're saying that it's possible to lose weight and heal your metabolism at the same time. How is that so?
Well, so like that is real in the sense that if you have too much of an energy deficit, your body will compensate for that energy deficit by downregulating non-essential like energetic processes. So like, hey, maybe I produce less sex hormones, and so I like have menstrual cycle irregularity or infertility, for example, is like a common example of that. Or I might not balance my neurotransmitters as well, and I might start to experience problems with my mood. So we do have those like natural compensating mechanisms that come out when we are too extreme with our weight loss, calorie restriction things that we do. But what I'm talking about is a different type of metabolic healing. That's not a different type of weight loss, I guess I should say. The weight loss isn't just based off of only caloric restriction. It's based off of like there's like 4 pillars really of like metabolic health that like you've got to be driving at those 4 things. And like you will naturally eat less food when you're doing that. And so you're losing weight in a healthy way, in the same way that like, I mean, if you think about like animals in the wild, maybe like I have 3 boys. So here's an example. There's snakes that eat like once a year. So like that's not like he's damaging his metabolism when he has his big kill and he eats an animal and he gets really fat from that and he lives off that fat for a year. That's like his natural feed fast cycle. And humans really have a natural feeding fasting cycle. And if you're eating the right foods in the right schedule, you'll do the same thing where you naturally self-regulate and your body wants to be in homeostasis and balance. That's what insulin resistance is really all about, is you're trying to protect yourself from being overweight. And so your body is like, okay, well, let's let the blood sugar go a little bit higher because too much energy is coming in. And so your body knows what to do, is what I'm saying. It has an innate wisdom. If it's just put in the right environment, that innate wisdom will take over and you'll get to a healthy weight without it being so difficult.
It's kind of funny that you use the example of a snake, because there's a guy in my home province of Alberta who created the snake diet, and it was this extremely, it's extremely controversial, but it works in one sense, right?
Like extreme fasting and then it's like feasting.
Yeah, basically.
Oh, that's
funny. It's pretty out there, and the guy's
We're
got
not
pretty,
snakes.
Yeah, he's got a pretty outlandish personality, and so I think funny. In order to promote that, you'd have to have a pretty thick skin.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
And you want to shed?
The dad jokes are real, you know. So if we could put this a little kind of in layman's terms here, right? Because you said your body will kind of downregulate non-essential energetic processes. That, in layman's terms, what exactly is our body doing?
Yeah, it's so like if you think about, again, it's like for me, the lens is always like the natural human setting, right? So because our genetics haven't appreciably changed since we were like basically hunter-gatherers. And so, I mean, that doesn't mean we need to go like build a shanty and like live out in the wild, but it means we need to kind of acknowledge like what our body is designed for. And so if you think about like that's been the majority of human history, and there's certainly in that like situation more flux in terms of like you have times when you have food availability and then you have times when you don't have food availability. And so we're designed to weather those storms of like between hunts, I guess you could say, low food availability. And so there's certain things that your body like has to do to keep you alive. It has to beat your heart, right? It has to contract your diaphragm for you to take a breath. So it's not going to stop doing that, but it certainly isn't going to want to be building muscle. It's not going to be like creating a baby. It's not going to be wanting to like run around doing a lot of like chores and having a lot of like productive energy around like that type of activity. And so then that way it can even impact like mood and like motivation around like non-essential tasks. So it's like interesting. Yeah.
I like to say that we have a famine biology, but we live in a feast world.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a biology, like so that's engineered or designed to be able to weather periods of not a lot of food, because historically speaking, we'd have probably times of we'd be moving into maybe an abundant time because it's harvest right now. Mm-hmm. But then we kind of fatten up a little bit and then go through the winter where we're just kind of live off the reserves that we have, especially in the northern hemispheres here, until we get to a time of abundance again. But we live in a 24/7 feast world now where we can just eat nonstop calorie dense foods that our brains are like, they're basically being hijacked. Our physiology is being hijacked through like modern food technology. Our psychology is being hijacked through marketing. And I think so many people are completely unaware that this is happening. And so what would you say are like some of the biggest culprits in our modern food environment that are driving the obesity epidemic that we see?
Yeah, so I break it into like 4 things, and I mean, I don't not bore you with like too much, but basically like the 4 things are like 1, excess refined carbohydrate, and the problem that drives is like high insulin. If you're not diabetic, that doesn't mean you don't have a problem with insulin. If your blood sugar is normal, that doesn't mean you don't have a problem with insulin. Most people have too high of insulin. And so that's one. A second one is protein. It's super common for me to see people who are under eating protein, and if they weren't under eating protein, when they try to lose weight, then they start under eating protein because they shrink their whole diet.
Right.
But protein needs to become a bigger piece of the pie, and so your diet has to look different in that way.
So you have a protein pie.
Yeah, exactly. The protein piece has to get bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third is inflammation. So like industrial seed oils, like I call them S and C fats, soy, sunflower, safflower, corn, cottonseed, canola. They're in takeout food, restaurant food, processed food, coffee creamers, salad dressings, everything has these oils that are high in omega-6. And I don't want to bore you with it, but like they damage mitochondria function. So
that's the mitochondria, that part of your cell that basically produces energy.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is not all carbs are evil, but we're basically we're swimming in a flood of problematic carbohydrates.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's not uncommon for me to see where like breakfast is a bowl of cereal with maybe a piece of fruit, or oatmeal is like they're always like proud of themselves. Oh, I start my day with like oatmeal with fruit and like brown sugar and syrup. It's like that reminds me of Elf, where he's like candy cane, corn,
totally.
and syrup.
Yeah, we're not elves.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Then there's the granola bar that's like got 20-30 grams of carbohydrate. Then there's the sandwich with 2 pieces of bread and probably some chips on the side. It's more carbohydrate. And then there's going to be the dinner that has the pasta, the rice, the potato, the additional like simple carbohydrate that spikes blood sugar again. And then there's probably an evening snack that adds some more again. So it's like, it's just too much, and it's not the right type. So I'm definitely not saying that everybody should be on a low carb ketogenic diet. It's more about the type of carbohydrate and the timing and the amount that matters.
So we're talking about metabolic damage here. How could someone know, or what would they feel if they have a damaged metabolism?
Yeah. So the most common things I tell people is, like, just since we were talking about my own story, here's what I can tell you. I used to get hungry if I didn't eat like every 2 hours. Whereas now I can miss lunch and I don't even notice it. It's like my appetite is not, it's like super steady. It doesn't have like crazy swings, and it's like easy to go between meals. Because when you have a healthy metabolism, you have what's called metabolic flexibility. So you're easily able to switch, like, oh, lunch isn't happening, going to burn some fat, no problem. Whereas a damaged metabolism, because the mitochondria are damaged, can't easily switch into fat burning mode. So they're like, no carbs are here, no carbs are here, eat.
Right. So that drives these crazy cravings, because I like to call it dual fuel.
Fuel, yeah.
Right. It's not about being necessarily fat adapted or carb adapted or whatever fancy term we use, but it's just the ability to utilize both fuels. So when you need it, you can switch to it.
Yeah.
And
like a hybrid car.
Yeah, there you go. You don't have like crazy cravings and energy crashes and things like that. What else might people find with a damaged metabolism they can look out for?
Energy is important. And then also just satiety. So if you're eating the right food and you have a healthy metabolism, you don't feel, you're like one of those people. I used to like look at people and just be amazed that they could eat like a normal sized meal and just stop eating. It was like I used to have to just eat so much food. I would out eat my boyfriends. Like, it was crazy. But you have like normal satiety when you have a healthy metabolism. Like, you feel full, you eat food and you feel full and you're able to stop eating. Whereas if you have a hard time like eating normal size portions, or if you feel like eating almost makes you hungrier, or you binge, those are like hallmark signs of a damaged metabolism.
I like that. It's like you eat and you never feel satisfied.
Yeah. Or it's like you have to eat an insane amount. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was a binge eater, and there's a whole emotional component to this as well. Trying to feel a sense of fullness that goes beyond just physical. But so then what are So we talk about having a damaged metabolism, and the energy piece, and not being able to feel full. What are some things that we could do to heal our metabolism? So someone says, "Hey, you know what? This sounds like me. Like I have to eat every couple hours. I never seem to have steady energy. I can, I'm always wanting to eat more at the end of a meal. What are some things we could do to shift that?"
Yeah. So what I do, like, I find that there's people are different a little bit in terms of their preferences of like how they like to do this. And so I try to leave it where people have open choices. But what I always do is like a 30 to 50 day period where you're really focused on this sort of healing phase. So you do those 3 things we talked about. The 4th one is decreasing inflammation. So and that's eating a lot more plants than what people typically eat. Even vegetarians, like most of them eat way too few plants. And so that's like the 4th element of it. So what I do is I set people up with like, they can either use meal plans, or they can use like a food checklist, or they can use a plate method, or they can use like individualized digital meal planning. In any of those ways, they can endeavor this 30 to 50 day period. That's like a healing period. So if it is a diet and it feels like a diet, but it's coming from a different place of like, you're getting healthier, and the goal is to get you off to where you don't need to do this anymore. And it's not like difficult to lose the weight once you get into this new like habit,
So when you're healing your metabolism, what sort of changes are taking place?
Yeah. So like let's just go through the 4. So like in the case of insulin, you're going to have lower insulin and more stable blood sugar. So it's not that you want low blood sugar, it's that you want your blood sugar to be less all over the place. So sometimes a lot of people where they'll like wear a continuous glucose monitor too. And like, we can see, it's like, wow, like look at before and after you did this. It was like you were up and down all day on this blood sugar roller coaster. And now it's just like steady Teddy across. And so that's like the first thing that will happen. And then on the inflammatory side, people tend to experience like better energy, sometimes less joint pain, sometimes better mood, better sleep. So those are like things that will happen when like inflammation is lower, and you'll be like, really? So like, why is it dangerous to be overweight? It's not the weight itself as much as it's like the inflammation that drives like heart disease risk, cancer risk, diabetes risk. Is like it's like the inflammatory component of that. And so you're decreasing
neurodegeneration in your brain.
Yes, dementia, exactly. So you're decreasing your risk of those chronic conditions as well. And then on the plant side too, aside from the anti-inflammatory element, when people get more fiber, they tend to have like better gastrointestinal health. They're feeding their microbiome, and like there's a ton of really like interesting research around like the metabolome. So like the microbiome, your gut health, the like ecosystem of bacteria there, and how it impacts metabolism. So like it's like a little bit down the weeds, but you basically have this thing where it's like these bad bacteria get like out of balance, and then they produce more inflammation, and then that creates the obesity. So it's like really wild, but you're going to be protecting your microbiome and your metabolism by eating finally enough fiber. Most people are at half the goal, if that. Yeah. So that's most of it.
Right. And you talk about inflammation, and we throw this term around a lot, like inflammation, but how would you, again, in layman's terms, how would you describe inflammation, and its effects kind of throughout the body?
Yeah. So like it's like you can't usually, unless you're like in a lab setting, it's like hard to like measure, but like I think it's kind of important to say that like, because as you said, this gets thrown out a lot, like, is this a true measurable thing? And it is. So like in studies, they'll measure things like CRP and like IL-6 and like IL-1, or like some like examples of like inflammatory markers that are actually like decreased when you shift away from like inflammatory like intakes like we were talking about. And so there is a true change in terms of your inflammation. And then again, it's going to manifest in the way you feel. So you should feel that you have better regulation of your appetite. You should feel better mood, better energy, better sleep. typically like better performance. It's like really amazing because when people start my program, it's like within a couple of days, they just feel dramatically different. That's so fast that it's not like the weight loss that is doing that. That's the change in inflammation and the shift in hormones that you get from eating the way that you're designed to eat, you know?
Yeah. And so you're talking about eating the way that you're designed to eat. Because I think about there's things like, let's say, paleo or ancestral eating, along with, say, keto and carnivore, which are kind of these interesting offshoots of this, in a sense.
Yeah.
What are things that were maybe not designed to eat, and would you go so far as to say that these things should be classified as something like a poison?
That's a good question. I mean, I think poison is like an interesting word because it really is that like 70% of deaths can be like contributed to chronic diseases that are driven by like improper diet. So in a sense, like it really is killing millions of people like every year. But it's not poison. Actually, like again, my kids keep coming up, but they're like, when we were having that conversation about sugar, how we were talking about how like, it's not like water. Like if you get thirsty and you drink water, that makes your thirst go away. Sugar's different. It's like if you eat sugar, it changes it over time. It changes your body to make you want more sugar. So it's different. And so like in that sense, like my kids are asking me like, so will it kill you? So it's like a similar question. And I was like, well, it's not like eating a cookie will kill you. But yeah, if you keep eating a lot of foods that act like sugar in your body, because we were having these like breakfast biscuits. I'm like, so this is basically a cookie to your body. Like,
right. Okay.
Anyway, if you keep doing that, I see people like that all the time where they're like, I'm really good. I don't eat sugar. And they have these metabolic problems. It's like, you don't eat sugar, but it's the whole thing we just went over. Like you have the oatmeal sandwich pasta scene going on every day. So you do eat a lot of glucose.
Right. Yeah. So then, if you don't mind me asking, like you mentioned you got 3 boys, what ages are they, and how do you help them to understand good nutrition?
Yeah, there's so they're 4, 7, and 9, and it's so interesting that you'd ask that because there is like a real threat, I think, with the children of dietitians. Like I've heard from children of dietitians that they develop disordered eating because of like being brought up in this like sort of like diet culture. Yeah. So I'm extremely cautious about that. But I also think that most children are being brought up in a way that is problematic in the sense of like, I think that like pendulums swing, right? And so like it used to be that it was more like strict with what kids, like they would be told to finish their plate and like what they had to eat exactly. And now I think it's kind of gone, which I'm not saying is good, but what I'm saying is it's gone the other way now where like here's an example. I had a dietitian friend over for dinner with her kids, and her belief is that you put everything out on the table, including dessert, and these were little kids, like 3, 4, 5 years old. You let them decide what they want to eat, and they're gonna like be like intuitive eaters. And so their boys each ate 3 cookies and went off to play. That's not going to teach your child to eat healthfully. That's just going to get them started early down this metabolic imbalance problem. And my kids do eat cookies. I'm not saying not to give kids cookies, but kids need more guidance than that.
There should be a recognition that kids don't have, like, one, I don't think you can intuitively eat junk food because it's engineered to basically give you a high. And kids don't have the capacity to emotionally regulate. All they know in their little world is, oh my gosh, this tastes amazing, I want more.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you came back to what we were talking about, like if you were like living in a like hunter-gatherer like environment and all there is like vegetables and meat, then sure, let your kids just eat freely. But they're not in a natural environment. They're in an environment where like Go-Gurts half sugar, all the cereals in them are half sugar. Like it's not normal human food. And so they can't be expected to navigate that naturally. It's just not possible.
Yeah. And I think, I for a while in my past, I held maybe what would be a controversial view, but I would have said that I think parents giving their children pop or soda should be considered child abuse. And that's really, really strong language to use because it doesn't actually sort of fit maybe our normal definition of it. But when we think about what you're actually doing to that child and setting them up for by starting them at an early age doing that, it's not the abuse that we normally see, but you're basically setting them up potentially for a lifetime of junk food addiction and diabetes and heart disease and so on. You're putting them down a really bad path. So how do you strike a balance?
Yeah, because you do want your kids, so like you don't want them to like go off a cliff, right? Like they've never been exposed to sugar, and then all of a sudden they're 18 and they go to college and like rah, like it's crazy, like they just like go nuts. You want them to you want to help them learn how to navigate the world and like a lot of things, including food. But I do think it's important to like first of all, like modeling. So like a lot of times I'll have people where like their kids they're picky eating is usually, not always, but usually it's like not even a learned thing. It's like they haven't learned and developed their palate. So it's like the tasting like healthy foods, usually like over time you develop a palate for it. And so like if your child has had a lot of like processed and sweet, like highly palatable foods and that's it, then that's like what the way their palate is. And so like the parents will come struggling because now their kid won't eat anything healthy because their palate has developed that way. And so they want to like know what to do about their picky eater kid, but like the parent isn't modeling that way of eating. And so that's an important thing is like modeling. And then I actually have like a system that's like has steps for teaching child feeding, but just so like there's more to it than this, but it's basically like the way you would like potty train a child, we literally like meal train our children, which sounds horrible, but it's not. It's like basically like when you have a baby, you just put healthy foods out like that are age appropriate, and they just kind of like nom on them, and it's not like structured. But then like right around the age of like 2, somewhere in like in the year that they're 2, we start where basically like every dinner is going to have like a protein, a slow carb, a vegetable, a fruit, and we're going to put all that out family style, and like nobody has to finish their whole plate, but everybody's going to get an age appropriate like portion of those. And if you have to at least taste everything, because I think that's like something parents don't understand is like you can put broccoli in front of your child for 18 years and they won't start liking it, but if they taste it 11 times on average, they'll start to like something. So
interesting.
Yeah, so they have to take a bite. Yeah, they have to take a bite of it. And I tell you what, I put out like broccoli, for example, or cauliflower, or whatever it is, like salmon, like I put it out and our kids just like devour it every night. It's not a struggle. So I think it's like that little bit of early struggle of like, okay, you have to take one bite of that. Yeah, it's a little counterculture. It's not modern, but like I take a bite and like before you know it, like literally our 4-year-old eats like last night he had like Brussels sprouts and like what do we have for our protein was like pork chops and then we had some fruit and then we had sweet potatoes. He ate like a huge plate of all that. Like it's like it makes mealtime easier in the long run once your kids like know how to eat.
Well, it's interesting because you said this is kind of like counter culture, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing because I look at it and I wonder if sometimes we've kind of infantilized our culture where the pendulum has swung way too far into like only pleasure and only feeling good and so on. Well, and the irony is like eating junk food only temporarily makes you feel good. And then you feel like, you feel like crap afterwards. Anyways,
yeah. Just like feeding your kids junk only temporarily makes your life easier.
I kind of give the analogy like if you sat your kid in front of the TV, had him watching cartoons all day and put a bowl of cookies in front of him, like his brain's going to love that temporarily. He's going to get a high from it. But what you're doing is you're setting him up for a life of heart disease, diabetes, all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes we kind of have to make some hard decisions and be uncomfortable and be willing for our kids to be uncomfortable as well. To help them develop a little bit of resilience.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what we do. They each have a bite. And then every night there's a dinner option or dessert option. And if they eat their whole plate, they can have the dessert, and it's like last night it was like they each got like a Hershey's Kiss, or like
Sure,
we have like bags of candy that are always like the Halloween candy lasts like half the year, and then the Easter candy lasts half the year. So we always have this little candy bin. They can pick out like a little piece of candy, or like I bake cookies and stuff. Like, or we just had birthday, I made a birthday cake. They can have like a piece of birthday cake. So it's like whatever the dessert is that's around, it's like we have sugar in the house. So I want it to be, because like that's our world, right? It's like sugar's around. I want it to be like normal to be around sugar, normalize eating a little bit of sugar, but like in the context of like, hey, you just ate a healthy meal, and you have a little bit of dessert, and you're active. Like, it's important, like physical activity and like limiting screen time. So there's like a lot of elements to it, but that's our approach. And like, it seems to.
It's kind of hard being a parent in the modern world. Like I have a 6-month-old, right? So I'm just, and right now he's still exclusively nursing, which I think is fantastic. I'm like,
good job.
Yeah. He's over 20 pounds. And so I'm like, this kid's not, he's a beefer. So it's not like he's underfed or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we like to do, like, that's the age where you usually start like baby-led weaning. So we just like gently offer them like safe foods we don't do like spoon baby food. We just like let them naturally develop into like chewing. It's like kind of interesting. There's a lot of research around like palate development and like breastfeeding and like chewing is like really important. So like spoon feeding a baby is like you're kind of not getting that like chewing to start happening.
Yeah, he's just started biting, which is like problematic for my poor wife. But
man, yeah,
when his little teeth is coming in, but
so
So to kind of bring back to the original sort of talk about metabolism and repairing a damaged metabolism, could you theoretically damage a kid's metabolism and set them up for a lifelong struggle? If it is possible to damage a kid's metabolism, is it possible to repair it even if it's been damaged for many years?
Oh yeah. So yes and yes. Like the epidemic of childhood obesity, like how is a child, and childhood diabetes?
Yeah.
Like that's metabolic damage. Like how is a child obese and like diabetic? That's a damaged metabolism the same way it is for an adult. But adults can turn it around. So certainly a child can turn it around a lot easier than an adult can. So the younger, the better.
Yeah. Now, let's just switch over to one more somewhat controversial topic, and that is this idea of body positivity. If I can get the words out. Body positivity and health at every size. And why I think these are really interesting talking points is because, again, I feel like we've infantilized these topics where we've turned it into like very heavy, hedonism or pleasure seeking. Like, I'm eating an entire cake on Instagram Live, and it's because I love my body. And I'm thinking to myself, something's a bit weird about this picture here. So how do you feel about health at every size and body positivity? And is there a way to go about it?
Yeah.
Maybe in an adult or mature fashion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess one thing that comes to mind is that like, look, I've been overweight, you've been overweight, we know what it's like. And so like, I would never want it to seem like I don't have compassion. So like, I think a lot of times it's like weight loss, people that sell weight loss, like they don't really have compassion, or like just the world doesn't have compassion is more what I should say, I guess, in the sense that like people aren't overweight because they want to be overweight. They're a victim of this environment where even the diets that they've been told are healthy are not healthy.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're lost. There's constantly conflicting information all the way from carnivore to vegan. Like how much more extreme can it get? And so I feel like people are victims of an environment that's extremely difficult. And they've often been raised in it. And so they don't know any different. And so I have nothing but compassion. But what's like all that said, most people don't know how to actually find their way out of being overweight, and they don't have a way of finding it. They've tried and tried and tried, and it's never worked. And so my sense of that has been, so like in the research, it's really a myth that you can be like metabolically healthy, obese in the long term. So that's not true. And so like, I think that there's a lot of just repeating that is true, that happens with between people that like aren't steeped in science and like understanding how to read science. And like why wouldn't that movement come about? Because you're trapped. You're overweight. You can't fix it. You don't know what to do. There's this idea that's like, oh, I can be metabolically healthy, like overweight. And the fact that being overweight is bad for me, like I have to climb onto that. I have no other options.
Right.
I would go with it too if I couldn't find any other way to
people are kind of
reconcile it for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. They're basically choosing this because they don't feel like there's another way out of it. So they're like, and you use the word victim, which is in one sense, it's kind of a loaded word. Because like victim represents, I think, being subjected to powers that are controlling you that you don't have control over. Is there a way to, even if you've been a victim, to become empowered and no longer not remain in victimhood?
So my business name is Empowered Nutrition. So I think
funny I should mention that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not that people haven't tried to seek knowledge. I think it's just that scientists themselves don't so I'm getting like a PhD and I'm constantly right now I'm writing a manuscript on metabolism and all this. And so it's like, I'm constantly looking at the science, and even in the world of obesity research, it's not fully evolved away from this idea that people are just lazy and they need to eat less and move more. That outdated, crazy idea is just prevalent still in science, which trickles down to policy, which trickles down to diet world. And so it's still just super pervasive. So it's not that people haven't tried to find knowledge. It's just that I think the knowledge hasn't become prevalent enough that people can access it, And so, but yes, if you do get the knowledge of how to do it, you can certainly reclaim your health and no longer be a victim of your situation,
Yeah. And I mean, I say to people, I don't buy lazy. Lazy is a symptom. And so when people say I'm just lazy, I'm like, well, something's wrong here. The lazy is just a symptom. And it's sometimes we use that as a cop out as well. I'm just lazy. And I go, no. And I think if we correct some things that are going wrong here, you're going to actually regain some of the energy. Lazy could be depression. Lazy can be burnout. There's, because when we're well fed, we want to be productive. We want to do things. When we want to just sit on the couch and become a Netflix zombie, something is wrong.
Right.
And
preach.
So I'm not getting fired up. So I don't buy lazy. I say there's a problem that needs to be corrected here. And it's interesting. If most of the time, if we just ate protein, lean protein, quality vegetables, and when I say lean protein, I don't mean not eating fat, don't just eat a chicken breast. And I'm actually trying to branch more into nose to tail eating, where I experiment. Because when I traveled around the world, we ate tripe and organ meat and things like that.
Yeah.
But when I came back to Canada, I come back to North America, it's not commonly consumed over here.
Right.
But in South Africa, I was eating tripe and tongue and tail and also,
Yeah, even in England, we lived in England, it's common to see liver and tripe and stuff on the menu. In Scotland, it's we're the weirdos here, in North America, that don't eat nose to tail.
Right. Yeah. And I don't want to get into the weeds of amino acid deficiency and excess based on
yeah, exactly. That's a lot. That's the same that came to mind when you're talking about energy and lazy being a myth. Another thing we really hit on, but when you're eating the diet we talked about that's healthy for your metabolism, it's nutrient dense. And so what that means is the normal diet is nutrient poor. And so a lot of the problems that with how people feel and the metabolic problems they develop is related to undernutrition from a vitamin and mineral sense. So it's too many calories, but not enough nutrition is a big part of that. Yeah.
Okay. So if you could remove one thing from our food supply, what would you remove?
You know what? I'm not going to say sugar because of what I told you. It's people know that sugar is bad for them. And so instead they just eat a ton of white flour. So I'm going to say flour.
Man, that'd be, well, bread wouldn't disappear. The first thought was the bread would disappear if you do that. I'm like, no, we just make healthier bread from different ingredients, right?
Yeah.
If there's one food that people should consume every day, I don't know. I'm like putting these absolutes on you, and this isn't nutrition gospel here, but I'm just what should they eat every single day if they want to be
Salmon.
metabolically healthy? Salmon.
I
Okay.
say salmon.
Okay. Why salmon?
Well, so like some of the most problematic and common nutrient deficiencies that I see are omega-3 fats, vitamin D, vitamin B12. And so quickly I was like, what's the food that has all three of those? Salmon.
Okay.
You're obviously going to miss out on some important nutrients if you only eat salmon. So I'm not saying that, but it's going to hit the points that most people are missing.
Okay. Awesome. I'd probably pick like bone broth or something like that.
Oh yeah. Did you know I wrote a book on bone broth?
I didn't. So
I did.
What's the book called?
The Bone Broth Miracle Diet.
Okay. Is that available on your website?
It's on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Bone Broth Miracle Diet.
Bone broth is, it's amazing. So like bone broth is interesting because it's like, why is that good for you? It's, well, you're the one that brought it up, so obviously but
yeah. The audience might not know.
Yeah. People aren't getting enough glycine to like counterpoint the amino acids in like muscle meats, and that can have huge impacts. Yeah, so that's a good one. There's not as many nutrients in it though.
I know people are like excited to hear about the glycine methionine imbalance too. So
yeah, exactly.
Totally. But that's really what it is, and it can be extremely helpful for your gut health. And we might have to make that another conversation, just talking about gut health and brain health. I think those are two really interesting topics. But I think bone broth can really help heal some of the inflammation that we experience in our gut. So so the Bone Broth Miracle available on Amazon. Yeah, right on. We could turn this into an infomercial. So, okay, if people want to learn more about how to heal their metabolism, how do they find you? Where do they find you?
Yeah, so I'm at empowerednutrition.health, or the program we talked about. It's linked there. It's called Lean for Life. So there's a tab at the top that says Lean for Life. You can check that out there. We're launching it. I run it live. It's a 4-week program that starts October 11th. So but registration is open. If people want to join, they're welcome to check it out. And there's also my contact details there if you want to ask me about it. I'm having a free webinar about it on October 4th. So people can contact me if they want to hear more about it.
You also run a podcast yourself?
I do. Yeah. The Empowered Nutrition podcast. So you can check that out also from my website. There's a tab up top that says podcast. You can hear an interview with Coach John. That was I loved hearing. You had so many like great insights to share. So that's available there as well.
Awesome. Anything else? Any last points you want to add? What's one takeaway for people if they want to heal their metabolism in a coconut-sized nutshell?
I would just say love yourself. Come at dieting from a different perspective of like, this is an act of self-care and not of like deprivation and like self-loathing. So dieting is like a loaded thing. It feels negative and it can be very toxic and negative, but it starts with like how you're thinking about yourself and your place in the world and your goals and like your care for yourself. And there is a way to I guess I would say like to approach health, weight loss from like that perspective of like pursuing health in a balanced way. And that's important. Yeah,
I think you hit the nail on the head there. Pursuing health should really be about creating a positive change and positive momentum in your life. It shouldn't be about taking away in deprivation, but this desire to better ourselves. So, well, thank you so much, Erin, for joining us today. It's been awesome. We've had a few live viewers popping in and out, which is fantastic as well. And this has been Wellness Unplugged. Catch more episodes at freedomnutrition.rocks/wellnessunplugged. And until next time, we'll chat soon.